Hey, this is Lemeiux and tune into the relay for the latest news in boxing all around the world. Thank you for supporting myself and other female boxers. We truly appreciate it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from Mike Coppinger. Source: David Benavidez and David Lemieux have signed contracts for a 168-pound fight that will headline on PBC Showtime card in the spring, likely in Phoenix, Arizona. Full story coming to ESPN. To which boxing insider Rick Glacier replied, Mike, Benavidez versus Lemieux is a gross mismatch. He's totally shot. Should be the Canadians' last fight. It's more Haymons PBC garbage. In a main event, they have no pride, and it's being sanctioned by the WBC as an interim world title fight. LOL. It's
ridiculous.
I gotta agree with Rick here. David Benavidez versus David Lemieux is a mismatch, though there is some precedence for it given the WBC's current rank standings. David Benavidez is ranked at number 1, and David Lemieux ranks at number 2. Daniel Jacobs, who we know is going to be in action.
Oh, he's spoken for. He's fighting John Ryder next year.
Caleb Plant, he got knocked the fuck out last month. I don't think he's going to be ready to face David Benavidez in his very next fight. Anthony Durrell, David Benavidez already beat the crap out of him. Who the hell wants to see that again?
There's Billy Joe Saunders, but who knows if he's going to keep boxing?
Haven't seen him since Canelo stopped him. Or quit in his corner, I should say. Pick your poison. Billy Joe Saunders looks a lot to me like a guy who's on cue to retire very soon. We haven't seen him since the Canelo Alvarez fight. You get a look at these ranked standings, and you more or less get an idea how it is we got here to where David Benavidez is fighting David Lemieux, number 1, number 2 guys.
The alternatives to Benavidez versus Lemieux really aren't much better.
So I understand the logic here. I understand the hierarchy of thought, the rhyme and reason that went into this mandate, though I still do agree with Rick. At this point, David Lemieux looks a lot like a shot fighter. He is little more than cannon fodder for David Benavidez. David Lemieux was a respectable fighter, a top middleweight in his heyday, a pressure fighter with a devastating punch, but at super middleweight, not so much. He's not the same guy that he used to be. And here today, all that stands between David Benavidez and a mandatory slot to get a title shot at Canelo Alvarez's world titles at super middleweight, all that stands in David Benavidez's way is David Lemieux.
A familiar name, yes, though not a solid one.
David Lemieux has proved to be less than solid upon his ascent to the super middleweight division. He's not the devastating puncher up there that he was downstairs at middleweight. And with those things in mind, I think David Benavidez is going to plow through David Lemieux, though whether or not that gets him that shot at Canelo Alvarez, that's another matter. At this time, we're hearing rumors and rumblings by way of Top Rank that the Canelo Alvarez people have expressed some interest in two of their boys, two of their guys, Joe Smith Jr. and Artur Beterbiev. Unified light heavyweight champion Artur Beterbiev, who's going to be in action.
Going to be in action this weekend against Marcus Brown.
In defense of his WBC and IBF titles. If he makes it through that fight, he seems to be in the running for a Canelo Alvarez showdown. The same applies to Joe Smith Jr., who's supposed to be in action early next year against the UK's own hard-punching Callum Johnson. If he makes it past that guy, he then has to get through Anthony Yarde, though I think, given Canelo Alvarez's drawing power,
If he really wants to, he can work something out.
essentially what I'm getting at is, David Benavidez might be very close to becoming the mandatory challenger for one of Canelo Alvarez's super middleweight titles. Might be very close to doing that, but who says that Canelo Alvarez is returning to the super middleweight division? It's conceivable that once he's done whatever it was he set out to do at cruiserweight, when he descends, he might descend to light heavyweight. He might not return to super middleweight. At your point, if David Benavidez does in fact become the WBC's mandatory challenger, that position could see him getting his old green belt back, though how long he'll hold it.
If Canelo goes to light heavyweight, he might vacate all those super middleweight titles.
Effectively hitting the reset button on the entire weight class. And if David is in position to pick up that WBC title, yeah, he could see himself becoming a champion again, though for how long is the question, since David Benavidez is a growing boy. He's on the bigger end of the spectrum as far as super middleweights go, and you have to question how much longer will this big guy...
How much longer can he keep cutting down to super middleweight?
Personally, I think it's about time David Benavidez move up in weight. I think he's been at super middleweight a little bit too long, and it's about time he go up there to light heavyweight. The problem is the PBC don't have any world titles for him to fight for. Thus, he finds himself squeezing into 168 pounds.
Maybe if Marcus Brown pulls the upset, he'll give David a reason to go up there.
Because right now they ain't got no titles for nobody to fight for. Not at light heavyweight. And I think that's a big part of the reason that David Benavidez hasn't moved up yet. So he's looking at David Lemieux as his next opponent for sometime early next year. He's looking to become Canelo Alvarez's mandatory challenger. And that could happen. That could very well happen because I've got David Benavidez stopping David Lemieux. I think he can get that far. I think he can do that much. I think he can become Canelo's mandatory challenger by way of the WBC. But who says Canelo's returning to the super middleweight division? If he doesn't and the titles go vacant, David will pick that green belt up. But how long can he hang on to it? That's the question.
It really isn't a foolproof plan.
David Benavidez has absolutely nothing to offer Canelo Alvarez in terms of marquee value. Canelo would be bringing all the finance and all the fanfare to the table. He's not bringing a belt for Canelo Alvarez to win. It's no wonder that Canelo's looking at those light heavyweight champions.
We'll see what happens.
In other news, Adrien Broner posted this by way of his Instagram stories, and it reads, "I'm gonna be honest, man. I say this boxing shit some bullshit, because at the end of the day, if you don't promote yourself, you're gonna get the bare minimum in promo. I love Showtime boxing to death, but they wait the last 2 weeks or the last week to promote a fight, and I just feel like they can put more into promoting us. That's why Eddie Hearn is doing good numbers, and keep people satisfied. Because first of all, he's paying and promoting the shit out of his fighters, and he don't have the best guys yet. But come on, man, stop playing, pay us our money, and help us really be stars." This isn't the first we've heard from Adrien Broner beating the drum, potentially crossing over to DAZN, singing Eddie Hearn's praises, saying that in so many words he's ready to earn with Eddie Hearn.
Well's running dry over there at Showtime.
So I've been telling you guys that here on this channel for the longest time, and for the longest time there have been other channels out there.
What Adrien Broner is saying here and now is the opposite of what they've been telling you.
They wanted to paint Eddie Hearn in a negative light in order to talk up the PBC, because in their minds, at least at that time, they viewed the PBC as something more, something other than just a boxing outfit.
Much like Adrien Broner, they've had a change of heart.
You done had everybody and their mama, all these content creators, defending and taking up for Al Haymon and trying to make him out to be the Martin Luther King, Malcolm X of boxing, where he's just taking care of all these black fighters and looking out for the black fighters. And as you can see, most of his black fighters are the fighters that's trying to shake the spot happen to be black, with the exception of David Benavidez, because I know David Benavidez was rumored to have tried to shake the spot and was gonna go to top rank.
ESPN Plus. I don't buy PBC pay-per-views, DAZN, whatever it is, Showtime. I don't support it. I figure out how to watch the fight. And that's what we need to do. Take our money out of boxing and stand up. Leonard Ellerbe shucking and jiving, threatening people, because guess what? That's market penetration on Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn is moving and shaking. And truth be told, he's just out working y'all. He's just out working. He does interviews with everybody, and it's starting to pay off. There is a glitch in the matrix, and it's called money. Al Haymon is running out of money, done ran out of money. He done took his percentage off the hedge fund, being the manager of the hedge fund. He like, I don't care. Luis Ortiz, I ain't got no money. Go on pay-per-view.
You are now hearing from these content creators is indeed true. The problem is it's about 3 or 4 years too late. These were the guys who told you about 3 or 4 years ago that DAZN would go under, that they would go bankrupt, that Eddie Hearn is a slave master, in defense of Al Haymon, who they have now turned against.
They told you Al Haymon was looking out for his fighters.
But I've been telling you for the last 3 or 4 years that Al Haymon is a two-bit shyster who's gotten by off the fact that his subordinates don't know how to identify a conflict of interest. The cover story for Al Haymon is that he's not a promoter. he's a manager. This is how he manages to skirt around the Muhammad Ali Act. He's supposed to be these fighters' manager. The problem is, he can't act as both manager and promoter at the same time, brokering major deals with networks like Fox, networks like Showtime. He can't do this simultaneously because he can't have both the network's best interest in mind and the fighter.
Because sometimes that's not the same thing.
Sometimes what's good for the fighter is not good for the network. Sometimes what's good for the network ain't good for the fighter. Case in point, Luis Ortiz was offered a multi-million-dollar title shot at Anthony Joshua, and somehow Luis Ortiz's people fumbled the bag.
Gervonta Davis was offered something like $7 or $8 million for a Tevin Farmer fight.
And the story is that he was talked out of it. He rejected that offer. Jermall Charlo, he was offered a multi-million-dollar payday to cross over for a one-off to unify titles with Demetrius Andrade. He, like Gervonta Davis, rejected the offer.
These networks they fight on aren't paying them for that exclusivity.
I mean, if you want exclusivity from the fighter, ideally, you have to pay for it. And at the end of the deal, there should be a big cash guarantee, like the big cash guarantee Anthony Joshua had with Sky Sports.
The big cash guarantee that Floyd Mayweather had with Showtime.
And ideally, these big cash guarantees are what your manager is supposed to be trying to get you.
Al Haymon manages these guys.
What they say. And Al Haymon's got it worked out to where all of these fighters won't cross the street to fight with nobody, not even the likes of a Canelo Alvarez. Caleb Plant wasn't going to cross over for that Canelo Alvarez fight. He was going to let the parade go by. Lucky for him, the undisputed crown meant enough to Canelo that he was willing to cross over to his side of things. But you'll notice that Caleb Plant had no intention of crossing over to the DAZN side of things, even though they offered to do the fight.
Al's got it worked out to where these fighters fight exclusively on his affiliated networks.
They fight exclusively for his broadcast partners without those broadcast partners paying for that exclusivity. Don't you notice that the Charlo brothers might float seamlessly from Fox over to Showtime?
They ain't got exclusivity deals with big cash guarantees with either of those networks.
Who benefits from that? Not the Charlo brothers. The networks might, Al Haymon perhaps, but not the fighters.
If Eddie Hearn has $7 or $8 million waiting for you on the DAZN side of things for a one-off situation, why shouldn't you be able to go over there and get it?
It's not like Fox offered you an exclusivity deal. It's not like Showtime did either, an exclusivity deal that comes with a big cash guarantee tacked on to it. No, you're free to roam. You should be. Ideally.
You always see that certain guys don't want to cross the street.
The old saying, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free, applies here. Why pay for exclusivity and promise every single one of these fighters a big contract minimum when you don't have to? You have Al Haymon to keep them in line and keep them on your side of the street so that they don't go somewhere else and become content for someone else, even though by all rights they should be able to. They ain't got no exclusivity deals.
Saves the network money by not promising these guys big contract minimums.
Saves the network and Al Haymon money and allows them to make money at the same time because these guys don't fight for nobody else, even though they should be able to.
If Eddie Hearn's got $7 or $8 million for you on his side of the street for a one-off situation, why shouldn't you be able to go get it?
Yet these guys, they never go get it. I mean, it seems to me that the content creators here on YouTube that used to once go up to bat, go up there and defend Al Haymon, have just realized what a conflict of interest is and how it not only affects the fighters, but it affects us as consumers as well. We're reaching a point to where almost every other month there's a pay-per-view.
Why do you think that is?
Al Haymon is running out of money, done ran out of money. He done took his percentage off the hedge fund, being the manager of the hedge fund. He like, I don't care. Luis Ortiz, I ain't got no money. Go on pay-per-view. Keith Thurman, I ain't got your guarantee, but I can put you on pay-per-view. And now Keith Thurman is in a pickle because he been out of boxing 2.5 years, got a son, got married. He need the money. And these are all stone cold facts. So now it's time for us to get up. Don't buy the Keith Thurman pay-per-view because it's not worth it. Don't buy the Luis Ortiz because it's not worth it. And keep on DMing, keep on mentioning. Make sure Leonard Ellaby has at least 100 new mentions today. 100 new mentions today because the jig is up.
How do you think so many fights that the consumers themselves were not asking for end up as pay-per-views? Why do you think that's happening? Why do you think that is? Why do you think for the last 2, maybe 3 years, the PBC more than anybody has been oversaturating the market with fights, pay-per-views that no one is asking for?
Because the well's running dry.
These PBC guys ain't got contracts like the contract that Terrence Crawford had with ESPN to where no matter what, He's supposed to get a certain dollar amount every time he gets out there. A contract minimum.
They have to honor, otherwise they're in breach of contract.
Those PBC guys ain't got a situation like that. Their situation is a situation to where they're sticking him on pay-per-view, hoping that me and you will foot the bill.
Which wouldn't be that bad if they were fights we were actually asking for, but who was asking for Ortiz versus Martin?
Who was asking for Thurman versus Barrios? Who was asking for Davis versus Romero, which subsequently became Davis versus Cruz? Who was asking for any of these fights?
Putting those guys on pay-per-views because those guys ain't got contract minimums.
Thus, the networks themselves don't have to pay those guys an arm and a leg to get them out there. They are under no obligation to give those guys $2, $3, $4 million every time they fight.
Which saves the networks a headache.
Though simultaneously costing those fighters a lot of money, a lot of opportunities, because there are other opportunities for those fighters out there that Fox isn't giving them, or Showtime. There's a lot of money that was waiting for a lot of guys over there on DAZN, but they passed up on that opportunity. DAZN has since tightened up their wallet.
Those guys missed out.
You don't have to question if the money was real. Mikey Garcia went over there to fight Jesse fucking Vargas and got a cool $7 million for what wasn't a $7 million fight.
That fight's worth $2-3 million at best.
$2-3 million total for the whole goddamn fight. Mikey got $7 million by himself, you understand. Never mind what Jesse Vargas got. They were willing to overpay guys at that time, and a lot of fighters didn't get to capitalize off that opportunity. That is as a result of Al Haymon keeping them on his network partner side of things because it benefits him and it benefits the network, though it doesn't necessarily benefit the fighter.
It took the content creators 3-4 years to realize that.
It took them long enough to realize what a conflict of interest is. They're about 3 or 4 years too late for the last 3 or 4 years. That's what I've been telling you. Al Haymon ain't nothing but a two-bit shyster who gets by because his subordinates don't know what a conflict of interest is.
And he stifled a lot of careers because of it.
Time, after all, is the one thing you don't get back. Take Keith Thurman, for example. After having lost his WBA title to Manny Pacquiao, he has sat out for the last 2, going on 3 years, and look at who he's coming back against after all this time. Mario Barrios on pay-per-view. What's that gonna do? A lot of guys that used to go up to bat for Al Haymon are now realizing that PBC ain't for the boxers the way they thought they were for the boxers. No. PBC ain't for the boxers, and they ain't for the boxing fans either. PBC is all about lining Al Haymon's pockets.
At the expense of everybody else.
At the expense of Fox, at the expense of Showtime, at the expense of the fighters, at the expense of me and you, the fight fans. PBC is all about lining Al Haymon's pockets until there's nothing to pull from the well.
This guy steals an entire stable of fighters from Golden Boy Promotions, and they thought he was Mother Teresa.
Comes as no surprise to me that now there are rumors swirling that he's backdooring everybody. He's essentially backdooring everyone, including Floyd Mayweather Jr.
Guys need to reevaluate what that relationship really was.
What it really is. For the longest time, there are those of you out there who thought of Al Haymon as being every boxer's fairy godmother.
Every PBC boxer.
Well, fairy tales aren't real, buddy.
Told you that guy's a shyster.